If your kitchen cabinets are sticky, greasy, or maybe they just look a little dull, let me show you the best way to clean that up. Now, the first thing I always like to suggest is to either dust or vacuum the cabinets before we start wiping them down. Now, the reason being is we just want to get that first layer of dust and debris off the cabinets. That way, when we do come through with the wet method, it's not going to create kind of a sticky, muddy mess on the surface that just is harder to clean. Now, a quick pro tip I always like to mention if you're going to use a Swiffer duster, I love these, they just work so well, is before you use it, usually they're kind of flat, just give it a quick spin with your hands here. That way it fluffs everything up real nice so it picks up more dust. Another thing I always like to mention is start by dusting from the top and work your way down to the floor. Now, something to look out for is if your cabinets have a little ledge like this one has down here, just make sure to always detail dust those because that is definitely a spot where dirt and dust likes to sit. If you are going to use a vacuum, I do like to mention to always use a soft bristle brush attachment like this one here, because they're nice and, well, soft, and they're not going to cause any damage to the surface. So now that we got that first layer of dust off of all the cabinets, it's time to mix up our cleaning solution. Now, there's a lot of different things out there you can use, but in my professional experience, these are the two that I use on a regular basis. Now, if your cabinets are painted and laminated like these, what you can use is just a few drops of Dawn dish soap and some warm water in a bucket. Now, if you do have natural wood cabinets, I do like to use Murphy's oil, but I will always say that a little bit goes a long way. If you use too much of this, it can kind of leave a residue on the surface and it just is harder to clean and kind of get sticky and tacky. So I only ever use just a capful and some warm water. Now for the actual cleaning process, I always suggest to use my 3-towel system. Now the way this works is pretty simple. 1 towel is used to clean. You dip this in the solution. The second towel is dipped in just water only to rinse, and then the third clean, dry microfiber towel is to come through and not only dry the surface, but also buff it so there's no streaks left behind. Just like dusting, it's always best to start at the top and work your way down. Now, you are gonna find some spots that maybe don't come off great with a towel, so I do suggest just to use a soft bristle brush or maybe even a Scrub Daddy because it's non-scratch. Just make sure to warm it up under some warm water so it's nice and soft. Now, those areas that are kind of close to your stove, unfortunately, usually are the areas that get very greasy and grimy. So sometimes you have to clean those multiple times, kind of go through with the system, clean it once, and then come through and clean it again. Or again, like I mentioned, use a Scrub Daddy just to give it a quick scrub there and then rinse and wipe down. Now, as a reminder, it's so important to come through and dry everything because if you do leave moisture behind, not only could it damage the wood and cause it to warp, but it also is going to dry streaky and kind of defeats the whole purpose of cleaning your cabinets. Now, like I mentioned with dusting, the ledges up here can sometimes be a little bit of a challenge, especially if you have maybe the designs that can have multiple layers of those ledges there. Just grease and grime and dust really like to stick in there. So for that, I suggest using a toothbrush just because it's nice and small. You can gotta get in all those cracks and crevices and remove the grease and grime. I also like to pay special attention to the high touch points on the cabinets and drawers, things like your hardware or even the corners and things. Kind of those areas you're just touching all the time, so there's going to be more grease and grime. Now your cabinets by your stovetop are always going to get a little bit more greasy as well. Now if you have white cabinets like these here, over time, if that grease really starts to build up on there and you don't rinse it or clean it away, what's going to happen is it's actually going to start yellowing, and that can damage the paint and the surface on the cabinets themselves. So something I do like to mention is that if you do have white cabinets near your stovetop here, it's always a good idea to wipe those down weekly if possible. Just a quick wipe down just to remove that layer of grease so it doesn't build up and create that discoloring. It's also a good idea to clean up splatter and spots like you see here on these white cabinets as soon as it happens, because if this was something like red tomato sauce, that can permanently stain. Now, while cleaning, you might find a few marks, especially on white cabinets that just don't come off. And for that, I like to grab a Melamine Sponge. These work really well. They're easily to just kind of come through and just give that area a quick buff. As you can see, this one's completely just about gone with a few scrubs here. Now, something I always mention, and I always say this because yes, I sound like a broken record, is the magic in magic erasers or melamine sponges is that they're very fine sandpaper. So you don't want to ever scrub too hard because if you do, you could remove the paint or finish. Now you'll notice that I'm using a bucket system over a sprayer for applying the cleaner. And the reason I like to do this is because if you do use a sprayer sometimes on painted surfaces, especially cabinets, and spray directly at that, the spray will kind of start to run down and leave drip marks, and sometimes those don't come out and can be permanent pretty quickly right after you spray the area. So using a bucket will help prevent that. Now, when it comes to cleaning the insides of the cabinets, I do recommend only cleaning one at a time. Believe me, if you take everything out of your cabinets all at once and then try to clean them, it just becomes a big mess and you get overwhelmed, speaking from experience here. So take one at a time, empty the cabinets, then use the same system we just went through, which is dusting or vacuuming first, then come through with the 3-towel system, make sure everything's nice and dry, and then put it back in. Now, I do usually use this time once I pull everything out of a cabinet to kind of look it over as I'm putting it back in place. Sometimes I'll find something I just don't use anymore, so then I donate it. Now, if you feel overwhelmed with cleaning all of the insides of your cabinets, or maybe you just don't have time, that's okay. What I suggest to do then is just clean the ones that you use most often. Things like your spice drawer or cabinet, or even where you store your dishes that you're opening every single day, and the ones next to your stove, give those a wipe out because those ones are gonna have the most grease, grime, and just spices and things spilled in them. Sometimes the drawers though can be a little bit unruly with all the stuff you have in there to pull it all out and set it on your counter. So what I like to do is just grab a plastic bin. I'll load everything into that bin, clean the drawer again with that same process that we talked about, make sure it's nice and dry. And then as I'm putting everything back in, again, I'm kind of decluttering the drawers and setting them up back nice and organized. That way, the next time you go to open them, it's good to go. Now, a question you've asked me in the past is how often should I clean my kitchen cabinets? Now, as I mentioned before, I do recommend cleaning those areas by your stove where kind of the grease and grime will build up at least once a week if possible. But as for everything else, I suggest cleaning them probably once or twice a year is best. We like to do it in the springtime for spring cleaning and then usually in the fall. And there you have it. Now you know the best way to get your cabinets clean and grease free. Now, if you have any questions, definitely drop a comment down below. I'm happy to help. And if you're new here, consider subscribing to the channel. We'd love to have you. I also need to give a huge shout out to the Clean Squad members over on our Patreon. Thank you so much for continuing to support the channel. If you guys want to learn more about that and join us over there, click the link down in the description below. And as always, I'll see you on the next clean.